IQ podcast. I'm Josh Berger.
And I'm Brian Lomax. And today we're going to talk about one of my favorite quotes that comes to mind when I think about being mentally tough and being able to handle adversity and challenges on the court. So the quote is from Jack Nicklaus, and Jack Nicklaus is a well-known golfer who won 18 majors. I believe that is still the most majors of anybody in golf, and he has lots of great quotes. I mean, Josh, you were telling me earlier about even his use of visualization is um, exceptional from a sporting perspective. But this quote is one of my absolute favorites. It's actually a chapter in my book. The chapter is, do you know how to play badly well? So here's the quote. The worse you're performing, the more you must work mentally and emotionally. The greatest and toughest art in golf is playing badly well. All the true greats have been masters at it. And when I read that, Josh, I'm like, yes, that is a big part of what the greats do that maybe others do not do so much, right? And to me, the opposite of playing badly well, right? The playing badly is the physical part, is playing badly. And maybe that's, just ends up being excuses and tanking. But I want to get your reaction to that quote. When you hear that, what does it make you think about? What are some thoughts that come to mind?
Well, it's an exceptional quote, and I love the way that it ends. That all of the greats have done that, have been masters at it, and we see the same in tennis. We think on the men's side, the big three: Nadal, Djokovic, Federer. We think of Serena. We think of so many that have come before them on each side, who have managed to be really successful, and they're not only winning Grand Slams, only winning majors when everything's working well. There's always turbulence. There are always those days where you don't have your best stuff, but what separates them, among other things, is their ability to still get the job done when they don't have it, when they're having that bad day. Um, I can think of any of those top players in their matches where they started off slowly. Maybe they dropped the first set. Maybe they went down a break in the second set. And did they tank? Did they say, "Hey, it's just not my day today"? No. Maybe there are certain examples we can find, but overall, these top players have have such great consistency and longevity of their careers, have been able to win titles, year after year after year after year, because when the going gets tough, when maybe they don't feel their best or they don't have their best stuff, they find a way. And I think what we'll talk about, how you can find a way, because this is going to happen to everybody. There will be days where you're feeling great. You're feeling like you're in that flow state. You're in the zone. Things are feeling effortless. You don't have to think about much. You're hitting your spots. And other days that are the exact opposite, where it feels like you're um, swimming against the tide, or you're things aren't going your way. The ball is hitting off the let cord, onto your side, whether you hit the ball or your opponent does. And, maybe you're not finding your rhythm or you're not hitting your spots. And those are those chances where you have to dig deep. But when we think of digging deep, when we think about finding a way, that's obviously easier said than done. It's a matter of, okay, how do we actually do that? What are some strategies we can use? What are some tactics we can use? What can you say to yourself in these situations? What are some routines or behaviors you can use? So I think there's a lot here. I'm really glad that you brought up that quote, because it's a quote from certainly a master of sport and of the mental side of the game. And I think every player can apply some of these takeaways to their own game when they're having that bad day, when things aren't going smoothly.
And I think playing badly well, like a lot of stuff, Josh, is easier said than done. But one of the reasons we're talking about it is because it comes down to perspective. It comes down to what we can control. And I think it also comes down to perhaps maybe false expectations. But I want to start with the idea of control. Um, because when we think of the things that we can control fully, I would assert that performance is not something we can fully control. I think we have influence on it, but it is not a fully controllable thing. And because if it were, most of us would perform well all the time. If it were, we would feel great in every single warm up that we have. And but the nature of the sport is it's as we've mentioned many times, it's a fighting sport. It's a combat sport. You have someone on the other side of the net who is not interested in you playing well. They're going to do things that for them, they hope to disrupt your rhythm. They hope to disrupt you in some way. They hope to not let you hit the shots that you're really good at. They want to find your weaknesses. They want to expose maybe your movement, your rally tolerance, right? They're going to find ways to pressure you and make you uncomfortable. And that is the nature of the sport. And so performance by itself is not fully controllable. Yes, we have influence because we're engaged in the dynamic with the opponent, but we don't have full control over it. And so I think that tends to lead to language that if we don't have the right conception of that, right? If you think that performance is something you can control, and I think when I hear tennis players talk about this, Josh, it's somewhat implied in the language that they use, meaning that, oh, I have to play well, or I should play well. I need to play well. And one of the things I would ask everybody listening is to examine the language you use with yourself and with respect to performing well. Is that, are you using such language? I have to, I need to. And what does that language do? It puts pressure on you. So if you go into a match with an expectation, and we've talked about the danger of expectations in tennis, but I think this is one of the most dangerous expectations a tennis player can have because it can set you up to really stop competing and to play badly. We want to make sure that you understand you're not going to play well every day, and in some cases, it may not even be that important. Just as Jack Nicklaus is saying here, you're not going to play well every day, but what's the important part? Is that you use your mental and emotional skills to get you through it. Now, we can go dive in a little bit more on that and what that means. But I think it's that language that all of us have to notice first. How are you talking about the need to play well, the have to play well? Is that something you say to yourself prior to matches? And what how does it make you feel when you go into a match with that expectation and then all of a sudden you're not feeling your game? I was talking to a player earlier this week. Well, not earlier, I guess last week, and he was talking about, well, what do I do when I don't feel the ball in warm up? And he's being very judgmental during the warm up about how he's playing. Like, I have to play well to do well. So I want to get your thoughts on that, Josh. Just in terms of expectations and the language that players use and the consequences of that.
I'm glad that you brought that up because it's also something I talk to people a lot about. Things like I need to do this, I should do this, I'm supposed to. Those things put a lot of pressure on us and can really prevent people from playing their best brand of tennis. And as we've talked about, you're not going to go out there and always feel the ball well from the start. You're not going to always go out there and and be winning, right? Even if you're maybe have a higher UTR or a higher ranking than somebody, you might start off the match slowly. And if you're telling yourself, I should be winning, this match should be easy right now, I need to beat this person, that's all going to work against you. Um, where if we can, instead think, okay, how can I be a problem solver out there? How can I figure this out? Figure out my opponent, figure out what are their weaknesses. How do I maybe make an adjustment if things aren't working, or give myself some more time to play myself into the match and find my rhythm. But rather than, talking to ourselves in a way that's going to put pressure on, have the type of mindset of I need to not sorry, not I need to. I want to, I plan to try to figure this out. I plan to be a problem solver and to and to be resilient and to handle those ups and downs that are going to come towards me. I think back to a talk that I heard with Ken Ravizza, and I know we've talked about him in the past, and he was, for those who aren't familiar, he was really a one of the greats in the sports psychology field. And when I was doing my master's out in California, he's from the California area. I had the fortune to meet him and to hear him speak a couple times, and he would talk about having a good crappy day, with the idea that it's going to happen. You're going to have crappy days. You're going to have days where you don't have your best stuff. And I remember him saying a couple things that really hit home to me. One of them was he would ask athletes, are you really that bad that you have to be feeling great and playing your best to get the job done? That was one of the things. And the other one he would say, and this is something I use with athletes, is, hey, you're not going to have 100% every day. You're just not. Some days maybe you didn't get a good night's sleep, or your stomach hurts, or you have something else going on in your life. Maybe there's something going on at work or in your family. Whatever else is going on, there are going to be days for everybody where you're not feeling 100%. But you better give 100% of whatever you have. So if you have 60% on a given day, I want to see you give 100% of that 60%. Not, okay, I have 60%, I'm not feeling good, and it's just not my day. I'm just going to tank, and then I'm giving more like 50% of that amount that I have left. So I think that's important. And to me, that's really where, just like Jack Nicklaus said, that's where the mental skills are maybe most needed. Where, okay, when we're playing well, when things are going smoothly, are they helpful? Yes. Do we want to still be using them like our in between points routine? Yes, because that's how we can make them, make it get to that point where it's really automatic. But when things are really going poorly and we need to figure things out and we need to maybe get ourselves out of a hole or out of a bad situation, those mental skills are especially needed and important.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the first of all, just kind of go back a little bit. The idea of tanking. You ask most tennis players, and I would say 90% will tell you, "Oh, I never tank." Um, but to be clear, this is kind of in that tanking range. So tanking is the, I would say, the extreme term, and we typically associate it with someone who is like actively not trying at all, totally sabotaging, etc. But tanking, that particular response, that emotional response to what's going on the tennis court, involves a drop in effort, a drop in fight, a drop in staying focused on trying to win the match, right? Achieving the mission. And when we go out there and we feel like we have to play well, expect to play well, need to play well, and we don't, and it becomes an excuse later, that's real. You're in the tanking zone. You may not be the outright tank that we sometimes see from. I mean, Nick Kyrgios has had some of those at the pro level, but you see it at junior levels especially. Um, it may not look exactly like that, but that's what it is. And so, in order for us to learn as tennis players, we want to eliminate tanking as any sort of response because you don't learn anything in that in that zone, that emotional zone, other than tanking doesn't win you matches, right? It's not something we want to do. So we got to understand that. So if this is a dangerous expectation, then the next natural question is, well, what should I expect? Should I expect anything? Should I expect to play poorly? Well, that may not be exactly what it is, but I would say we should expect the possibility that we may play poorly. We may also play great. So we want to be realistic in our thoughts about how we may play. And we could go back to an algorithm that we talked about in previous episodes. If this, then that. Well, if I'm not playing well, then I'm gonna do X, Y, Z. Rather than if I'm not playing well, it's over, right? And so we want to understand. And you were getting into this. I think this is where we're going to start going, Josh. Is on that mental emotional piece. What does that mean? All right, we're not playing well. What does it mean to engage with the mental and emotional skills in that moment? Um, so maybe you can take it from there, and we can kind of talk from that perspective.
Yeah. You in that moment, I think it's important to really start with awareness and start with what is my emotional state like? How is my mindset right now? Most likely, if you're not playing well, there's a pretty good chance you're probably frustrated. There's a pretty good chance you're probably, that maybe you're feeling defeated. Maybe you're feeling like, hey, this might just not be my day. So oftentimes people are sort of starting with a deficit at that point. So, I think it starts with that awareness of, okay, what is lacking here? Is it my focus today? Maybe my focus is elsewhere. Maybe there's something else going on in my life, and I'm thinking about that, and rather than this match that's in front of me, and that's manifesting in me not moving my feet and me not noticing my opponent's glaring weakness, and me not really engaging with my legs, or me not really spending that time in between points to give myself the best chance going into that next point. So maybe it's my focus, or maybe it's my reactions where, okay, recently, let's just say you've been really trying to focus on those automatic reactions that you've been having that we've talked about a lot on this podcast. And okay, I find myself today going right back to that. Okay, so maybe that's where we want to address. Or maybe it's some other piece, right? Maybe it's something else that's lacking. Maybe it's our consistency. And that adjustment that needs to be made is something more technical, like adding more spin or increasing our margin. So I think it all starts with awareness, as it often does. And once we can be aware enough to realize what is going wrong here, what's holding us back from playing well right now, why are we having that bad day in the first place, then we can start to think about what skills are most needed. What skills are we not applying? What are we not using that we're usually trying to incorporate? And I would point to that as a starting point.
Yeah, good. I think for me, when I think about the mental emotional skills, so let's separate your mental emotional performance from your physical performance. So the physical performance, as we said, is not fully controllable. In terms of at least the performance of tennis, but there are certain physical things that are controllable. Attitude, well, that's more mental, but effort for sure. Um, Maybe the body language, what your intensity tends to look like, how that's produced. Those are all controllable. Um, but I would say that your mental emotional game is controllable. What you decide to focus on, the decisions that you make, yeah, your intensity level, how you regulate your emotions, your perspective on what is happening on the court. So, all of these things, if you can be bring much more control to that aspect. And I think that's what Nicholas is talking about, is looking to make sure just because you're physically not performing well doesn't mean you automatically will mentally and emotionally perform badly. They don't have to be connected. You can perform great mentally and emotionally, even though you're not playing the way you would like. And that is where we as players have to put more effort into that. Okay, so let me be more disciplined about my routine. Let me be more disciplined about, my changeover, my body language, my breathing, these things that I can control. And this is a moment where I like to, and I know I've referred to this in the past, Josh, the inner fortress of mental toughness that we all have, right? My little Jenga tower um, analogy. And we all have that inner fortress of mental toughness. We have that Jenga tower within us. We don't want to sabotage our own fortress of mental toughness just because we're not playing well. We want to strengthen it. We want to use it. And this is something that we all need to practice, is having a strong foundation for that fortress. So you want to make sure you have enough confidence and self-belief that even when you're playing poorly, you believe you can win. You believe you can still fight for what's going on. Um, Maybe another big part of your fortress of mental toughness is your optimal level of arousal, intensity. Maybe it's just, I'm the type of person who's really persistent and I persevere. One way I think to build that fortress of mental toughness is to come up with some virtues and values about yourself that you think really distinguish you as a great performer, a great competitor. And they could be things like persistence, grit, perseverance, focus, confidence, belief, discipline, enthusiasm, enjoyment of the challenge. The more that you understand your values and virtues as a competitor, the more you can go to that stuff when things aren't going well and try to just be that, embody those virtues and values more. And that's where you're going to find that mental and emotional performance taking you through, right? Because what's within that is the things that are kind of the opposite of the tanking response. Fights in there, enjoying the challenges in there, controlling the controllables is in there. And so this takes practice. This takes off court work, I would say, as well, so that you understand who you really are as a competitor, what your values and virtues really are there, so that when you're on the court, you can best represent what's what you want to represent. You want to feel proud of how you performed in the end, and I think that the more you can identify with those values and virtues, the easier it will be to do it.
I I totally agree, and I think that's a great approach. And I think something that you can layer on to that is that you can really focus on, and again, put in the work to really determine what am I doing on a bad day, right?
Yeah,
So almost planning for that ahead of time.
that's right.
What does that bad day look like in terms of my attitude, in terms of my effort level, in terms of these different pieces? Okay, what do I look like on a really good day? What is my attitude like? How am I speaking to myself on a good day? How does my effort level look? What am I doing strategically that's working well? And let's be really clear about that. And I love that you're bringing up the character attributes and virtues. And I think we can also think about, what are those qualities that that we do well on those good days that most likely are not taking place on that day when things are going poorly.
Right, right. And the more that we practice this, then I think it helps players sort of move to another level as a competitor. I recently wrote a blog post about how not to lose, and when we're in this sort of playing badly, we're losing. We're the ones out there maybe making bad decisions, because we're feeling stress and pressure, and there are multiple reasons for that. Um, when we feel stress and pressure, what happens? We usually feel out of control. Things feel a little chaotic. And so, one of the ways, there are different things we can do when we're trying not to lose, which is a weird concept maybe because I'm asking you to do a not, but what we do is really, identify with our best selves, and that's not only, I think that's also naming that a little bit. Maybe you see yourself as a fighter. Maybe you see yourself as a professional. Yeah, there might be various things that you see yourself as, and then that's where we bring in those virtues and values of the character piece, um, identifying with that. So research has shown when we do that, we're more likely to have good performance, and this is especially important when you're feeling like things are out of control. Um, Bring discipline to what you do, and I think that's again control the controllables. But maybe to help you play better, you simplify your game plan. Maybe you say, all right, next few points, all I'm going to do is go high and cross court. That's it. And it limits your choices. And now you've given yourself something simple and easy to do. Maybe that helps. Maybe it's more working on your breathing and so you can feel the ball better, loosen up better. I think we've got to be 100% productive with our thoughts and our body language. And I say productive rather than positive because sometimes some people can use some negative emotions and channel it into productive things, right? So let's say productive. Um, and lastly, I think this might be the most important, Josh, and we've discussed this concept before. You've got to enjoy the process, the challenge here. Don't make it so much about winning and losing. And I think a lot of times that factors too much into our judgment of our performance. It's not all of it. Sometimes it's like, oh, I'm just not feeling the ball. I don't have any rhythm. But the losing doesn't help. And so the more we bring ourselves to enjoy the fight, to enjoy the challenge, to enjoy the idea that competition and this match can make me better if I fully invest in fighting for it. If I don't fully invest in fighting for it, I don't necessarily get better today. The only thing I learn is that I need to fight and fully invest in these matches, right? Um, so I like to, equate this quote with also learning how not to lose, how not to sabotage yourself, how not to maybe even self limit in your performances, and instead transcend those things by understanding your identity, understanding your best virtues and values, bringing more discipline to the controllables, um, and then we see where your performance is. And then if you can enjoy it and enjoy the learning process, you're going to have a better chance of learning to play badly well, and maybe you become one of the greats.
I I think that's a good way to sum it up, and I think um, you also it's important to recognize you might start to turn it around. You might fight, you might dig in and start to improve your own performance, and it might not be enough on that particular day.
Right.
And that's okay. You can still get a lot out of that. Where maybe you turn that match from, you know, being down 5-2 in that second set, and after losing the first set, and you won that second set, and you fought in the third, and you went down. But the next time you're in that situation, hopefully there's some more self belief there. Hopefully you say, "Hey, I've been in this spot before. I know what I want to do." Brian, you brought up the if then. If I'm in, if I'm playing poorly, if things aren't going well, then I need to dig in and rely on my mental and emotional skills. I think that's a simple one to get started with. If I am losing or if I'm not playing well, I want to make sure that I'm not beating myself, that I'm not sabotaging myself. Um, I think there's a big difference between losing and getting beaten or beating yourself, which happens I'm sure has probably happened to everybody or just about everybody. And trying to learn from these experiences, taking ownership over them as well is a big piece of this. And then trying to really identify, okay, if I'm in this situation again, how can I dig in to those skills that I have? What are those qualities that I want to embody? Trying to learn from our experiences so that we don't end up, having the same thing happen over and over again.
Yeah, and because if we don't learn from the experience, then the same thing will happen over and over again, right? So, yeah, it's really important that we do that. And I think if we are thinking more about that learning and more about, again, fully investing in what we're trying to do, then we make progress. And that's really the point here is that we may screw it up and you may, quote unquote, lose the match more than your opponent won it. Okay. Can we take that in? Can we process that? And now make it our goal that we're going to do that less. If I'm going to lose a match, I want to come off the court and say, I didn't actually lose it. My opponent won it. There's a big difference between those two statements. Me losing the match and being sort of the cause of the loss is something like you said, Josh. We've all done that, but we don't want that situation. We want to be if we're going to lose a match, kind of on the scoreboard. We want it to be such that the opponent has actually had to win it and had to finish me off. I did not make it easy for that person, and yeah, I lost. But when you do that, you learn a lot more about yourself in that situation. Maybe you learn more about your physical game in that situation. Like, all right, X, Y, and Z needs to get better if I'm going to be able to compete with this guy. Because I know I didn't give it away. I know I made that person close me out. So these are the aspects of my game. And there may be still mental and emotional things to learn. So this idea of getting through playing badly, getting through, you know, technically us losing matches more so than the opponent winning is really important. And the more that you can feel that you're not losing, you're not giving things away, that you're making your opponent earn it, you're making your opponent finish it, then I think you can feel really good about where you're going as a competitor.
Definitely, definitely. What I would also add is, you want to put yourself in a position where they have to win it, they have to earn it, and you also want to give yourself a chance for your opponent to potentially lose it, right? They
That's right.
might be in, they might have to serve out that match or have to finish out the set, finish out the match, and they might feel the pressure. They might, sabotage themselves. They might overthink the situation. They could get frustrated. They could, throw in some additional unforced errors or some double faults. But if you tank, if you're not fully engaged, if you don't dig in and rely on these skills and you know qualities, you don't give yourself that chance. So you want to give yourself the chance. You want to make them earn it and make them serve it out or make them finish you off, and not give them an inch where, hey, if they, you know, at the end of the day, if they won the match and they earned it, it feels a lot better coming off the court in that situation than feeling like you beat yourself.
And this concept was in play at one of the most famous matches of all time in men's tennis, the 2008 Wimbledon final between Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer. And if you recall, Nadal won the first two sets and then lost the third and fourth sets. And many people wondered how he would handle that. And one of the things that he had told his coach and uncle, Tony Nadal, is that I'm not going to lose this match. And what he meant by that, and what he followed it up with, is Federer is going to have to beat me. but I'm not going to lose it. And he did exactly what you just said, Josh. He put Roger Federer in a position where Federer had to close him out. And, and, and on that particular day, he was not able to do it. Rafa played in such a way that he was not going to lose. He was not going to give it away. And so he managed to come out on top in that situation. The more of us that can get into that um, style of play, or style of competing, I should say, um, the more great competitors we are going to be producing here. And this type of thing happens at every single level of the game. And so you want to be the one in whatever level of play that you're at that is not self sabotaging, is okay with having a bit of a rough day performance wise, but knows how to stay in the match, knows how to use those mental and emotional skills, stays fully invested in the fight, and gets all the way to the end. That's a really tough person to play. That's a player who's going to develop some serious locker room power in whatever level he or she is playing.
Absolutely. That's going to be a player very difficult to beat. I mean, we've talked about this concept of winning ugly, right? The title of Brad Gilbert's well-known book that I certainly got a lot out of. I, recommend to a lot of people. I would recommend to all listeners, if you haven't read it, to check it out. Because I think there's a lot to learn from that. And, I this concept of winning ugly is I think a concept that all players can try to adapt. Doesn't mean you don't have good strokes. Doesn't mean you can't win, you know, and make everything look great when things are going well. But there are days where you will have to win ugly, where you're going to have to dig deep and maybe make adjustments and be gritty and figure it out. It's not always going to be smooth sailing. That's for sure. So being able to have the confidence in yourself to figure it out, to win ugly, to do what it takes to get the job done is can often be the difference maker when the match is on the line, in that tiebreaker, in that third set. When the margins between two players are so slim, if one player has the confidence in themselves to figure it out, even if they're not playing well, right? They've gotten to that point, and now it's a matter of, all right, who can win, who can finish this off. So I think that, you know, what that feeling that on any sort of day, even whether I'm playing really well, whether I'm not playing my best, I am going to compete. I am not going to beat myself. I'm going to fight. I'm going to dig in. I'm going to try to be aware of the dynamics of the match and, give myself the best possible chance. Again, we can't guarantee results. You can never know, am I going to win today? But you give yourself a better chance um, by exhibiting those qualities.
Yeah, 100%. So hopefully we've given people some things to think about with respect to how to look at the alleged necessity of having to play well, right? Come up with different ways of looking at that so that you too can do what Jack Nicklaus talked about and learn to play badly well, or as Ken Revisa says, learn to, what is it, have a good, crappy day?
Yep.
Exactly. All right. Cool. All right, Josh, great discussion. And thank you to everyone for listening. That's our show for today. For more on today's episode, please check out the show notes. If you have any feedback or questions for me and Josh, please email us at tennisiqpodcast@gmail.com. You can also use the Twitter hashtag tennisiq. Additionally, please subscribe to the show on your podcast platform of choice, including YouTube, so you can be notified of new episodes. You can also check us out on Instagram. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon in our next episode.